Welcome back to the Deep Dive.
Always good to be back.
You know, it's funny. When you think about Donald Trump, right, it's usually the headlines that come to mind. The big, bold stuff.
Oh, yeah. He's definitely been a headline generator, that's for sure.
But the thing is, our sources this time, they're pretty interesting. Excerpts from his Wikipedia article, and they paint a much more detailed picture. We're going to try to understand the man behind those headlines, yeah?
I'm intrigued. Let's go deeper.
So his journey, childhood to business, reality TV, ultimately to the White House. A fascinating trajectory, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. And it's a journey full of contradictions, I think, wouldn't you say? I mean, think about it. Born in Queens to a wealthy real estate developer, but then he goes to military school, gets those famous draft deferments during Vietnam, though, bone spurs, right?
Even his early life is hinting at these big debates that'll come up later.
Right.
Privilege versus self-made, taking action, or maybe avoiding it.
Right.
And then you layer in the 3 marriages, 5 children. Family becomes part of his brand, too, even before The Apprentice.
Speaking of The Apprentice and the whole Trump brand, let's talk business. Because this is where the contradictions get really interesting. He claims he started with a, quote, small loan of $1 million.
$1 million small loan, right?
But, you know, the sources, they paint a different picture. A much larger inheritance, some pretty significant benefits from tax loopholes. So was he a brilliant entrepreneur? Or was he just a lucky heir?
That's the question, isn't it? And then you've got those 6 bankruptcies. I mean, that's not just, raising eyebrows. That's a pattern. What does that tell us about his approach to risk, his business strategy?
Yeah, a lot of ups and downs, that's for sure.
And it wasn't just real estate either. He had that USFL team, the Miss Universe pageants, even an airline for a while. It seemed like he wanted his name on everything.
Oh, yeah, he was building a brand, no doubt.
But there are 2 ventures that really stand out, don't they? Trump University and his charitable foundation.
Ah, yes. Both ending in lawsuits, settlements, raising questions about his ethics way before he even got into politics.
It's almost like a preview, isn't it? These lawsuits over Trump University, people claiming they were misled, the accusations of self-dealing with his foundation, makes you wonder, were those controversies a taste of what his presidency would be like?
Interesting point. Because even with all that baggage, he still managed to transition from businessman, somewhat tarnished reputation, into a serious political contender.
How does that happen? I mean, you look at his early political affiliations, they were all over the place. Democrat, Republican, Independent, even a stint with the Reform Party. Not exactly a consistent picture.
Right, but that's what makes it fascinating. Because he leveraged his media savvy, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Think The Art of the Deal, ghostwritten, yes, but it creates this image of him as a master negotiator, a winner.
Right.
Then you add The Apprentice, turns him into this reality TV star, solidifying that image of success and power.
And you have to remember the context, right? This was reality TV exploding, celebrity culture at its peak. He understood how to use that, build this persona that really resonated with a certain segment of the population.
Absolutely. He wasn't just a businessman anymore. He was a celebrity. And in the age of reality TV, celebrity, well, it translates to political capital.
So how did this celebrity businessman, with, let's be honest, his somewhat questionable past, how did he capture the Republican nomination and then the presidency? That's where it gets really interesting, because he campaigned on some very specific promises, and they resonated with a very specific group of voters.
The border wall, draining the swamp, putting America first. Powerful messages, for sure. Tapping into a deep well of frustration and anger.
And it wasn't just slogans, right? These campaign promises, they tapped into something deeper, I think. This sense that the system was rigged.
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. And I think it's crucial to remember the context here, The financial crisis, it was still fresh in people's minds. There was this feeling that the elites, well, they got away with something. And Trump, he positioned himself perfectly as the outsider, the one who could shake things up.
Right, the disruptor. So, okay, he gets elected, now he's got to govern. Let's dive into some policies, the ones that had real impact. Where do we even start?
Well, one of the most significant, got to be the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017. Huge win for Republicans and really a cornerstone of his whole economic agenda. It lowered the corporate tax rate drastically, made changes to individual income taxes as well.
And this passed with 0 Democratic votes, right? Already, just a sign of how divided things were. What were the long-term effects of these cuts, though? I mean, is there consensus?
See, that's the debate that's still raging. Supporters, they argue it boosted the economy, right? Critics, they say it mainly benefited the wealthy, ballooned the deficit. But there's no denying it was a major policy shift.
Huge. Okay, then there's deregulation. He rolled back a lot of environmental regulations, right? The Paris Agreement, the Clean Power Plan. Pretty significant change in direction there.
Oh, absolutely. And his argument was that these regulations were just stifling economic growth, right? And his supporters, well, they loved it. They cheered those rollbacks. But environmental groups, they were fiercely opposed, argued that it was putting the entire planet at risk. And again, this debate, it just keeps going on.
No easy answers, huh? And speaking of tough topics, we can't talk about Trump's presidency without COVID-19. It's almost impossible to separate the two.
Yeah, I mean, it really was a defining moment, wasn't it? His initial response, downplaying the threat, pushing those unproven treatments, contradicting health experts. It generated so much controversy.
It seemed like at times he was prioritizing the economy over public health. A gamble, to say the least.
It was a gamble that divided the country, no doubt about it. Some people, they felt he was reckless. Others felt he was being pragmatic. And of course, those long-term consequences, well, we're still figuring those out.
Yeah. It's crazy how much of his presidency got consumed by this one event. But let's not forget about foreign policy either, right? That was also pretty different from his predecessors.
America first, right. That was the mantra. Withdrawal from international agreements, tariffs imposed on China, and those interactions with world leaders. Unpredictable, to say the least.
Like that whole summit with Kim Jong-un. It was a spectacle, no doubt, but did it achieve anything? And his relationship with Putin, constant scrutiny, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
His foreign policy was very much driven by his personal instincts, which made him, well, a very unpredictable player on that world stage. He ruffled a lot of feathers, that's for sure.
And, on top of all that, you had those constant scandals, the investigations, obstruction of justice, conflicts of interest, the impeachments. It felt like one thing after another. Exhausting, honestly.
Yeah. It was exhausting, even to follow from afar. And remember, he was impeached twice. First time that's ever happened to an American president. He was acquitted both times, sure, by the Senate. But the fact that it happened at all, that speaks volumes about the level of political turmoil during his presidency.
It does. It does. And all of that, it leads up to January 6th.
Yeah.
Honestly, still hard to wrap my head around it all.
Oh, yeah. A dark day for American democracy. There's no doubt about that. His rhetoric in the lead up to that attack, those false claims of a stolen election, created a very dangerous situation.
And that speech right before the attack, urging his supporters to, and I quote, fight like hell. It's just chilling looking back on it.
The House Select Committee, they concluded that he was directly responsible for the violence that happened that day. And, whether you agree with that conclusion or not, those images of the Capitol being stormed, they're seared into our collective memory.
Yeah, it really felt like a turning point, didn't it? Even after everything that had happened, this felt different. Serious questions about, the future of democracy here.
Oh, absolutely. And it's a conversation that's still very much ongoing, especially now, as we think about his post-presidency, what he's doing now.
Well, that's a whole other can of worms, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, we've gone from Trump Tower to the Oval Office, impeachments, a pandemic. Now we're entering this uncharted territory, his post-presidency.
And trust me, it's just as fascinating, just as controversial.
So Trump Tower, Oval Office, impeachments, a pandemic,
Yeah.
and here we are post-presidency. You'd think maybe quiet retirement. Golf course.
Quiet. Doesn't seem like his style, does it? He's still a major force in the Republican Party, wouldn't you say? Endorsements, rallies, fundraising. He's still pulling strings.
Yeah.
Even without the official title.
It's remarkable. And right at the center of it all, you have the big lie. This constant insistence that the 2020 election was stolen. It's not just rhetoric. It's had real consequences, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's fueled so much distrust in the whole electoral process, given rise to this, well, election denialism. We've seen it play out, right? State legislatures, restrictive voting laws, all based on these unfounded claims of fraud.
And the fallout from his presidency, it's still rippling through our entire political system. And his rhetoric, honestly, has only gotten more extreme since leaving office. Those pronouncements on Truth Social at his rallies, kind of unnerving.
It is. You have a former president openly attacking the legal system, these inflammatory statements. And it's all amplified by social media. It creates this environment where, his supporters feel like he's being persecuted. Meanwhile, his critics see him as this genuine threat to democracy itself.
And these aren't just abstract concerns either. He was indicted in New York, right? Those felony charges related to the hush money payments.
Historic moment, no doubt about it. First time a former U.S. president has been indicted on criminal charges. And there are still those ongoing investigations, right? His attempts to overturn the 2020 election, his handling of classified documents. It's a lot.
It's a tangled web, that's for sure. But even with all of this, he's still considered the frontrunner for the Republican nomination.
It's wild, isn't it? Really speaks to his hold on a significant portion of the electorate. They see him as this fighter, a disruptor, someone who's not afraid to challenge the establishment, love him or hate him.
So where does that leave us? We've covered his childhood, his business ventures, his time in the White House, the legal troubles, his ongoing influence. It's a lot.
It is. Donald Trump is a complex figure, to say the least. His legacy, it's still being written, and it's going to be debated, probably for generations. But one thing's for sure, there's no denying the impact he's had on American society, on our politics, our culture.
He's changed the conversation, that's for sure. And whether you love him, hate him, agree with him, vehemently oppose him, he's a force to be reckoned with.
He is, and that's why these deep dives, they're so important. It's not about taking sides, it's about understanding. It's about having the knowledge to form your own conclusions, to participate in this ongoing conversation about, well, about where we go from here as a country.
Really well said. So to our listener, thank you for taking this deep dive with us today. A lot to think about, right? Trump's childhood, his businesses, that time in the White House, his ongoing influence. Hopefully you're leaving here feeling more informed, more equipped to navigate the complexities of this, well, let's just say unique figure in American history.
And who knows what the next chapter holds. That's the thing about Donald Trump. He keeps us all guessing.